All right, welcome. Today we are diving into a pretty wild what-if scenario. What would actually happen if a couple of modern legends, true masters of their craft, just woke up in the ancient world? Let's get into it.
I mean, really think about it. You've got these two titans of human ability, and boom, there's suddenly an ancient Greece. How would a world that believes in myths, that's just figuring out philosophy, a world of pure Bronze Age muscle, how would they even begin to wrap their heads around what they're seeing?
So who are our two subjects for this little thought experiment? Well, on one hand, you've got the master of motion himself, Bruce Lee, and on the other, the master of pure, unadulterated speed, Usain Bolt. I mean, one of them is the picture of impossible grace and power, and the other moves at a speed that just shouldn't be possible, and you better believe their arrival in ancient Greece is going to create some, let's just say, very interesting new legends.
And just to be clear, there's no welcome packet for this trip. They are just dropped cold into a world that has absolutely zero context for what it's about to witness.
So, first up, Bruce Lee. He wakes up just outside Athens and is immediately surrounded by a squad of Spartan soldiers. Now, you'd think they'd notice his physique, right? Nope. The first thing they see is that iconic yellow jumpsuit. To them, it literally looks like he's glowing. And that's a pretty clear sign that, this guy is not from around here.
So naturally, one of the soldiers tests him, throws a spear right at his feet. Bruce Lee just kind of shakes his head. And then, in a blur, a motion so fast they can't even see it, the spear is just in his hand. He holds it out to the completely stunned soldier. And for them, there's only one logical conclusion they can possibly come to. This man can bend time. Okay, so at the same time, Usain Bolt's arrival is just as jarring, but in a totally different way. He stumbles upon a casual foot race, and, feeling generous, he gives the locals a pretty big head start. A second later, he doesn't just pass them, he absolutely vaporizes their entire concept of what speed is. He turns this friendly little race into a moment of pure collective shock.
So, as you can probably imagine, word about these two anomalies spreads like wildfire. And Athens, being the center of logic and reason and all that, well, they can't just let this slide. They decide they have to understand these men. They need to measure these seemingly impossible abilities. It's time for some official tests.
And you have to understand, this all happens incredibly fast. We're talking about 1 week. In just 7 days, both of these guys go from being total strangers to living legends, with their skills being formally tested and, of course, debated all over Athens.
Okay, so get this. For Lee's big test, Athens sends its fastest messenger on an all-out sprint across the city. And Bruce Lee, he just follows him, at a walking pace. And when the completely exhausted messenger finally stumbles to the finish line, Lee is already there, just casually leaning against a wall, not even breathing hard. So yeah, that whole he can control time theory is starting to look pretty convincing to them.
Now for Bolt, the test is way more public. Oh yeah, they take him straight to Olympia, and they pit him against the undisputed champion of all of Greece in front of thousands of people. It's their greatest hero versus this complete stranger.
And look, this isn't just some champion. We are talking about a guy who had not lost a single race in 10 years, a full decade. To the Greeks, he was the absolute pinnacle of athletic achievement, the living, breathing embodiment of human perfection. For 10 years straight, nobody could touch him.
So the race starts, and honestly, it's over before it even really begins. The gap is it's huge. Bolt crosses the line, does its signature pose for a crowd that has no idea what they're looking at. And their champion, the guy who was a living legend just seconds ago, he's now having a full-blown existential crisis right there at the finish line.
Okay, so this is where things get really interesting. Because it's not just about the physical stuff anymore. It's about the cultural fallout, the philosophical questions. The Greeks are desperately trying to understand the why and the how, and it leads to what might be one of the greatest misunderstandings in history.
So, you've got all of Athens' top philosophers sitting down with Bruce Lee, right? They ask him for the secret, the key to all his power. And his answer? It's simple, it's profound, and to them, it is completely baffling. He just says, be like water. And this just perfectly shows the communication gap, right? These philosophers, they live in a world of tangible physical elements. They completely, totally miss the metaphor. They argue about it for hours and eventually land on the most practical, most physical, and most hilariously wrong interpretation you can imagine.
And this one misunderstanding kicks off a massive societal shift. Suddenly, everyone in Athens is obsessed with hydration. Seriously, one famous philosopher just abandons his life's work to write an entire scroll dedicated to the virtues of soup. deep philosophical debate, yeah, that takes a major backseat to chugging water.
Meanwhile, over in Bolt's corner, a philosopher comes up to him with a similarly deep question. They see this incredible godlike gift, and they just assume there has to be some grand cosmic purpose to it all. They ask him, what is the reason for such speed?
And Bolt, probably holding a stack of letters they've already asked him to deliver, just gives the most down-to-earth, practical answer you could imagine. He doesn't go on about glory or pushing human limits. He talks about logistics. And for the Greeks, this is a mind-blowing revelation. The true purpose of godlike speed is apparently for really, really efficient mail delivery.
So, after all the initial shock, after all the hilarious misunderstandings, what's left behind? What are the actual lasting legacies these two guys accidentally create in the ancient world?
Well, for Bruce Lee, his godlike status gets sealed by one simple request. A blacksmith asks him to break a huge block of stone. Lee's like, sure, and gives it one single precise tap. The block splits perfectly in two. And when Lee refuses to take any payment, the blacksmith comes to the only conclusion that makes sense in his world, a world where gods walk among mortals all the time. This guy has to be a deity in disguise.
And what about Usain Bolt? Well, his legacy is just as bizarre. He gets so good, so efficient at delivering stuff that he pretty much single-handedly invents the ancient world's first express delivery service. Turns out the grand purpose of his historic speed wasn't about glory at all. It was about convenience.
I mean, this really sums it all up perfectly, doesn't it? You have Bruce Lee, who's seen as a wandering god, and his big secret gets misinterpreted as just drinking a lot of water. Then you have Usain Bolt, this total human anomaly, whose incredible gift is believed to be for logistics. So one of them leaves behind the most hydrated city in history, and the other basically invents ancient Amazon Prime.
So that kind of leaves us with one final thought to chew on. If you could send any modern expert back in time, think about it. A brilliant coder, a master chef, a chess grandmaster. Whose skills do you think would be the most confusing, the most misunderstood? It really makes you realize just how much our own context defines what we even consider to be genius.